When you know how to write a shell script, you'll be able to automate complicated shell tasks pretty easily. And if you try to do it in Python, you won't have to learn the pretty horrible syntax that most other shell scripting languages use. Now, the first thing that I would probably do if I wanted to figure out how to run a shell command in Python is do a Google search for Python shell command. Here, you'll see the documentation for the subprocess library, and this is actually the advanced way to run a shell command, but advanced also means complicated. And we can do everything that we want even without using the subprocess module. So if you want to do anything complicated like piping between multiple processes or running several processes at the same time, then you might want to investigate the subprocess module. But otherwise, you can instead search for Python OS, which is the operating system libraries for Python. You'll see in here there are a bunch of shell commands that you might want to run. So os.chdir is for change directory. But there's also one method call inside of the OS library that will pretty much do everything that you want, and that is the system command. Here you can see os.system will execute the command a string in a subshell. What this means is that it opens a shell and then it passes command to that shell. It will then behave as if you had run that command. There's one exception, which is that because it runs a subshell, any command that would affect the current process will basically have no effect. So for instance, if I say os.system cd foo to try to change into the foo directory, it will create a new subshell, change into the foo directory, and then immediately close that shell. So because the shell changed into the foo directory, not Python, that means that the change will not persist. However, if there's anything that you want to do, like if you want to grep over a bunch of files, or if you want to look at users, or if you want to zip something, then you can still do all of that using system. Now, let's try it out. If I want to just open a Python shell, then I can type Python. And just to verify, the first thing that I'll need to do is import the operating system library, so import OS. Then, in order to run the system command, I would just say os.system, and then pass in a string, something like ls, and then this should behave exactly the same as if I had typed ls. You'll see nothing happened, and that's because there are actually no files in this directory. We can verify that by quitting out of Python by saying Control-D, and then saying ls. You see there's nothing there. If I go back into Python, import os, and say os.system ls ... that should list one directory above. And you can see these are all of the different folders, one directory above. So we were in the cs1u folder, and we were currently in the scripting folder. So here, scripting is inside of the cs1u folder. If you want to do anything a little bit more advanced, you'll probably want to make a Python script. So in order to create a script, you just have to open a new file in your favorite text editor. So if we want to do a Python ls, then we could call it pyls.py. py is the common extension for Python files. We might want to create a shebang line, which will let us execute the file by default. For the shebang lines in Python, you can pretty much always just type this line verbatim. Then we'll always have to import OS if we want to use os.system. Then whatever command we want to run. So for instance, if we want to run the os.system ls, we would just say os.system and pass in the string ls. And that's it. Now let's see what happens when we try to run it. And we called it psls instead of pyls. Now, when we try to run it, you can see we get permission denied. That's because we never told the operating system that this was an executable file. And you can see, if we do ls-l, that this file does not have the execute bit set. In order to do that, we'll just say chmod, which changes the permissions. U for user, that means it'll only change it for me, plus x, which adds the execute permission, and then whatever file I want to add it to. Now you'll see that it is highlighted in green, which means executable. Now if I say /pyls.py, it will have the same functionality as if I had said ls. If you don't want to deal with the chmod, so let's say that we change the permissions back away, you can see no longer green. We can still execute it by running Python. So you can see it ran ls. That's because you're not actually directly executing this file, you're just executing Python and telling it to execute this file. One word of caution is that the return value from os.system is going to be whatever the return value of your shell command was. And a shell command is going to return 0 on success and some other value on failure. For instance, if I type something that doesn't exist, the return value is going to be a 127, command not found. What that means is that the return value of ls is not going to be the files in the current directory. The return value of ls is going to be 0. If you want to actually get the output, then you can do that using the subprocess module that I talked about earlier.